fuel. Okay. As far as fuel goes, we can talk a lot about fuels. It's not only how much it is, but also what are the sizes of the fuels? Are they little tiny fuel particles or are they big old logs? And the arrangement, are they all on the ground on the surface floor with some fluffy stuff up here, or is there continuity, which is what we call lateral fuels? So there's and the old adage is we're not going to do anything about the weather. We're not going to do anything about the topography. The thing that we can manage to change fire behavior is the fuels. So all of the welcome. Of all of the parameters of the weather, really wind is going to be the biggest driver. Almost every catastrophe is under a strong wind. So we pay a little bit more attention to wind rather than temperature and relative humidity. And so this is a result of a weather analysis from a coastal weather station south of here for a 5-year period. And it's kind of a funny funny diagram in that the long bars show, I'll come up and point out. The long bars are the ones that is how frequent it is. So this is the most common. Your winds are most common from the west and southwest. And yeah, west, southwest, and southwest. But the thickness of the bar is how strong the winds are. So your stronger winds are actually from the northeast and northeast. So those are up to 30 to 40 miles an hour, and this is only for during October. So it's an interesting analysis, but it's a pretty compact way of showing both the frequency as well as the strength of the winds. So you've got winds that go from the southwest and the northeast. It's kind of like reciprocal back and forth. So the other component of it, now we talked about weather, would be fuel. And we see vegetation, and vegetation is translated into fuel, which will be the next slide. But in general, here it just shows the distribution of the kinds of vegetation, and you all know it. The grass, the yellow is grass, the dark yellow is a shrub or sometimes called chaparral. The green is woodland, and that includes your eucalyptus forest, and then the dark green are the dark green are the pine trees. Right. Fully 30% of the area in Rolling Hills is shrub, and a quarter of it is the grass, and you have just a quarter of 12% in your mixed hardwood, and just a little bit in the conifer forest, which is further north actually. So as I mentioned, it's translated into fuel types. And fuel types are a way that it's the input for our models. And it describes both how much fuels it is and whether or not it's grass and it dries in the summertime, or it's leaf litter. Those are the kinds of things that it will be characterized of. It also will tell you, the fuel type will also tell you the compactness of the fuels as well, and whether or not it's mostly live material or dead material. So we've got 6 different fuel types marked here, and each one of them has a different way that they burn. Grass, of course, burns really quickly and doesn't produce much heat, and hardly any embers. Grass and shrub together will burn a little bit hotter, but not as fast. Your chaparral is known for its really long flame lengths and super fast spread rates, but they don't pass very many embers. The ones that do pass embers, if a fire does get into a canopy, is your hardwoods and then your eucalyptus. So you've got the light green is hardwoods with grass and shrubs, little grass and shrubs, and that's mostly located in your backyards and your neighborhoods. Whereas the dark green, where there's a bigger concentration, is usually found in the canyons. And the dark red chaparral is obviously down further in the south on the conservancy land, and a little bit in the canyons as well. And all these are in the report, so the maps are in the report too. But I also want to point out that structures are still too. In fact, your houses, your wood houses, is drier than anything, any of the vegetation in the landscape. So that, we just have to remember that they're part of the complex. The last, let's see. The little white dots, wrong one. The little white dots and the white road, the little dots are your structures, and the white lines are the roads, and they're told, the model considers it as non-burnable, and we all know that's not true. So, I just wanted to again point out that structures are real. They burn differently than vegetation does. They, have a delay in ignition. The vegetation will come right through and burn up quickly. In fact, most vegetation is consumed in 90 seconds from when it starts. And it's mostly because of the little stuff that goes real quick, and it moves on. But a house takes a little while to ignite, and the modeling normally is 5 minutes to get to ignition, 20 minutes to get to more involvement. And then after 20 minutes, when the house is burning, then it too will cast fires, embers. And those embers may go longer than the others. So it's kind of a leapfrog. The vegetation will go first, then the houses will catch fire, then it'll cast longer, and then the vegetation will catch up to it. So there is this interaction between vegetation and structures. And this model ignores the structures, but because it is, what we know at the time, there are more models that are coming out now that are gonna address structure to structure ignition, and, just wanna let you know where it's coming. The separation between structures is key. And I know that there's some concern about, the relationship or the comparison of Rolling Hills to the Palisades and the Eaton fire. But because of the lots here are large, the building separations is also quite distant. And I'll go into that in more detail, but that the kind of fire that happened in the Eaton fires is not likely to happen here. All right, so, but we do wanna not forget your structures are vulnerable to ignition. And the way structures are ignited are two different ways. One is from embers. You probably heard a lot about how embers get in your tents. The embers get in little nooks and crannies in your houses. But the other part that we saw in the Eaton fire particularly is the house-to-house ignition, where the radiation from one structure just keeps burning and burning and burning, and eating, and finally the next house ignites from that. So that's a different heat transfer mechanism. Okay, so I'm gonna show a few maps of the fire behavior analysis, and just to show a distribution of flame lengths. And what is important is that flames less than 4 feet high, about this high, can be put out by a person with a firefighter with water and shovels, etc. Direct attack is possible. But if you get over 8 feet, they won't even attack it with water. They will back off and say, we will do it by indirect attack. So in order to have good fire containment efforts, you wanna have your flame lengths be green or yellow. And the good news is mostly around, the neighborhoods in your residential area, it is green and yellow. And, in the canyons, because of the abundant fuel there, it's greater than 11 feet. But I wouldn't panic about the canyons, because again, we wanna overlay where the hazard is with the things you care about. And those things you care about are your roads and your houses. Because the roads are your evacuation routes, that's a life safety thing, and then the structures are the homes you live in. So, when you look at this, think about where the green is in relation to your evacuation routes and where your homes are. So this is the place where we look at where the fire might get into the trees. And we hear about fire crown fires. And if you look at the active crown fire, it's less than 1%. Really what happens is passive crown fire is another way of saying mass torture. It's pretty exciting word, but it's where the vegetation underneath the trees propels the fire into the tree canopy. And there's a lot of that in Rolling Hills. It says it's half of the area has vegetation under trees. And that's in the area that has trees in it. If you have a grass, you can't have crown fire because there's no trees. If you have a shrubby field, same thing. You don't have any trees, you can't have a crown fire. But, not only does the crown fire, this mass torching, produce an amazing amount of heat, it also produces those embers that can be propelled a long ways. And for the trees that you've got here, especially the eucalyptus, they're famous for long distance ember cast, could be miles. I do have to say that also structures cast embers a very long distance too. So just put it in perspective. So, the rate of fire spread is, feet per minute. If you get more than, 20 feet per minute, yeah, that's moving fast. Can we all run fairly quickly in 20 feet per minute? That's it's a pretty good pace. So anything that is orange means it's a pretty rapid spread. And rate of spread is mostly a concern for fire containment, so that you can plan where you're gonna put your fire line, and also for evacuation planning. You wanna know that if the fire were to start from outside Rolling Hills and come in, how long it would take for you to get out. And there are some evacuation analyses that point to that you can use this rate of fire spread to help with evacuation planning. Right, so, I'm moving into risk assessment because we talked about weather and we talked about fields, but there's more to understanding what is at risk and what you can do about it. And that is simply a site assessment. And that includes your terrain. And we mentioned, as you know, some of the area is nice and rolling hills, but you've got some pretty steep canyons. And the orientation of the canyons are pretty well aligned with your southwest and northeast winds. So whether or not it comes from the southwest, it goes up a bunch of canyons, and when it comes from the northeast, it goes through the same canyons, just in a different direction. So in some locations, other places, you'll have a canyon that blocks the wind, not you. Perhaps the only thing that might block it would be crest on the top. So that's an important consideration for where a fire might, how a fire might travel. Want to spend a little bit of time on the lot layout and size and why it's different from the LA fire. You do have larger lots, and so you have quite a bit of what you call structure separation distance. Far enough away. So that any kind of radiant heat from one house is not going to be, it's going to be dissipated before it gets to the other house. So that's really good. But the other part of that is you all control your own destiny. Because what your neighbor does is not as influential as what you do. Because you yourself are going to be the one that controls whether or not your house burns up, and you can't blame it on your neighbor. Okay. Your access is, you have a couple of really good spine roads, Portuguese Bend Road, Crest, East and West, are the main ones, but also, you've got some other nice, areas. Eastfield is another good evacuation route. And then a variety of spur roads that are really one way in and one way out. So they all have to congregate to this. So in thinking of life safety, those are the things I think about is where are they going to aggregate, and how can you get out both ways, multiple ways. As far as vegetation goes, it's been really impressive to see the progress that this association and the city have done over the last 15, let me do the math, 60, long time. Just even recently, that there's been an awful lot of good work that's being done, and I can imagine you guys are only gonna do more, so that's very good. So, now that I talked about the hazard and the site assessment, let's talk about the risk part of it. And always, life safety is the highest priority. And life safety is translated into evacuation routes. So any kind of management and priority would be prioritized along roads and your evacuation routes. And then secondly is structure protection. And that's done through both vegetation management on your own lot, called defensible space, and also the structure retrofitting. This zone 0 is a new wrinkle, and it's causing a lot of people heartbreak and heartburn, because, many of the traditional landscaping has been to put your landscaping right next to the house. And if zone 0 says that you don't do that. And that's because the embers will land right next to, if the embers land next to your house, it can get behind the window, the wall, and start a fire there. Or it can start a little bush that's there, and that might be underneath the window, that might catch break the window. Or it might be a hedge that's next to your house, and then that's enough of a heat output that it will catch under your eaves on fire. So this zone 0 is really being quite emphasized. I was surprised at how vigorous the studies have been, and how much knowledge has come out and proof that actually works. And then the last, as far as risk assessments goes, would be your natural resources. And those are important resources. Probably the most important thing is to make sure the soil doesn't go away. And with the events in Palos Verdes and in some of the sliding here, that's important consideration. So we want to make sure that your soil just stays right where it is. And then, of course, aesthetics and wildlife. While you're here, and hope you are, enjoy it. But that's a priority, life safety first, structure protection, and then natural resources. So what can we do? Well, it's broken down by a couple of things. First is your own property can have an individual plan. And it's a plan that would span not only what you can do for vegetation and how you might treat your yard so that it becomes a suitable defensible space, truly defensible space, and as well as retrofitting. There are a jillion programs to educate and incentivize homeowners. You know, it's handouts from LA County or Cal Fire, or certain legislators are trying to do cost share for the retrofitting. Please take advantage of all of those. There are certain policies to remove some bad acting plants. I understand Tom's got taken away recently, so that's an example of that. And then the Rolling Hills Community Association will be managing their easements and the commonly held areas. And then also folks will work together on plans. Those are all doable things. As far as individual landowner plans go, here's some examples of defensible space. Your plan should cover all the physical dimensions, timing of the treatments, and frequency of treatments. So that you know what you're gonna do every year. You know what you're gonna do first, you know, both the kind of plant that you're gonna manage and how you're gonna manage it. So here's some examples of how you would prune up the bottom of the water. Trees should be pruned up to 8 foot high, and the shrubs under it should be no more than 2 feet high, so that you have that separation between the tree canopy and your shrubs. The rule of thumb is a shrub or your plant underneath is going to burn 2.5 to 3 times the height of it. So if you have a 2 foot shrub, it'll get to 6 feet high, and it won't hit the branches that are 8 feet high. So that's why we have this separation. It's super important. And remember, the air is a really good insulator. And what you've done is created and used that air as an insulator concept between the shrubs and the bottom and the lowest branches. So hopefully there's what I call a donut around every one of the trees, where there's very low shrubs around the base of every one of the trees. So that you can keep that fire from getting into the tree canopy and not have mass scorching. Okay. And of course, you are gonna wanna mow your grass, but the bottom blue box talks about shrubs, and we might apply it to hedges too. If you have a big mass of shrubs, you're gonna wanna separate it from the next one, because you don't want that shrub to keep burning and keep burning. Again, air is an insulator, you separate the shrubs horizontally, then it'll let the fire kind of calm down and then get to the next one that won't be so voracious. So that provides a rule of thumb of, twice the distance of the height. You have a 2-foot shrub, next 4 feet, there's another 2-foot shrub. So that it's clumpy. And there's some good examples of that on rolling hills. Some folks have done a fabulous job of it, and I'm sure I have some pictures of it. But also don't forget to start looking at your structure to retrofit in your individual landowner. This might be a good time to talk about, this little handout about fire resistant plants. And it has a couple of examples and names, but the main thing takeaway is what makes them fire resistant or not fire resistant. One is, of course, we like plants that have low fuel volume, so there's not much to burn. We like plants that are really wispy, so that the air can flow through. It's really dense. There's a really good, it's gonna burn hotter. We like plants with big leaves, because its big leaves are harder to ignite than small leaves. And then, we like plants that don't have a whole lot of dead material in it. You know, orchards are a great example. There's hardly any dead material in your apple tree. We probably pruned it. But other trees, such as pine trees, have a lot of dead material that just is in there. So that is the way the plant grows. And then there are other examples of where some plants are normally just really succulent, like succulents. So that's a good characteristic of a fire resistant plant. And then last is, something that's cool, it's called mineral content. Any plant that is gray has a high level of mineral content. And for some reason that makes the flames tamp down. They don't ignite very well. Olive trees are a good example of that. Lavender is, but it has oil, so it offsets it. But Santolina, Sweet William, those kinds of plants are really cool. Look, plants that are gray. And then the last bunch of bad plant characteristics is a high oil content, and that's why rosemary is on a bad list, eucalyptus is on a bad list, pine needles are on a bad list. Those things with a high oil content. And the high oil content is important because oils have 3 times the BTU content than regular cellulose. So when it burns, it's amped. It's really gonna burn. So think about the characteristics when you buy your own plant, and you don't have to rely on a list. So this handy cheat sheet lets you make your own decision. So here are some good examples of defensible space on rolling hills. You can see that the trees have been limbed up, and the shrubs underneath it, and all the your beautiful ground covers, wildflowers are underneath that. These are just to give an idea how pretty it looks and how it translates into a fire safe environment. The picture on the top left is a great example, but now we have to take away those little plants underneath the windows because of the zone 0. I know. I know. Again, just to get a sense of it, the upper left, you can tell that there are shrubs underneath the tree. They're kind of short, but they're also separated. They're not one whole line. And then the bottom left, the tree with multiple branches has also been limbed up so that the foliage is way at the top and not reachable by any of the vegetation underneath it. And on the right, bottom right, those are olive trees with those great gray leaves and mineral content, and they too are segregated. And of course, mowed grass is cool because of low fuel volume and it slows the rate of spread as well. All right, so here's this is just hot off the press from the Board of Forestry as to what they recommend is acceptable in your zone 0, your first 5 feet. They do not want to have, your, bench with your, cushions nor your firewood next to your house. They don't want to have potted plants in a combustible, planter. This is a big one. They don't want to have a gate or a fence that attaches to your house.
Don't wanna have one.
A gate or a fence that is wood attached to your house. So buy stock in metal fences. Because, and there are getting to be more metal fences now. I personally bought some beautiful metal fencing fences.
What about plastic?
It's not as great, but because the plastic will, melt and it'll be a petroleum pool fire, but it won't cast embers, so but it might block the firefighters from getting in your house because they're not gonna jump over the pool fire.
Is that the same as vinyl?
The vinyl is actually, it's turning out to be okay, not, the metal's better, but, vinyl's okay. All right, so then, landscape materials, that means mulches. So no mulch next year for first 5 feet. Of course, mulch elsewhere for water protection is good, but not in the first 5 feet. And then decorative structures that are probably wood, they don't, that means trellises next to your house. And the really pretty things that you love next to your house. Anyway, it's not there. They are, the one that they really think is allowable is pavers and rocks. This building is a good example. They did a great job of retrofitting for zone 0. A mature tree, this is important. You can have a mature tree, the trunk of the tree is okay in your first 5 feet. The branches need to be up high and usually not over your roof. But you doesn't mean you need to cut down the tree trunk within the first 5 feet. And then fences that are offset from your house that do not touch it are also okay. 5 feet at least.
Significant
Fences?
fences?
So you can have a fence that, we don't wanna have fences that connect to you. But you could have a fence that is this way and is parallel to your wind, with siding, as long as it's 5 feet away.
In zone 0, there are a lot of residents in Northern Field that the whole house is actually raised. And one of my neighbors, I went out there and I saw about almost 6 to 8 inches of dead leaves, brushes, brush that has been accumulated there. So I think this zone 0 for rolling hills should be amplified. So for those houses that are raised, that is a huge risk area. It's not just a regular crawler space. It's raised 4 feet, 3 feet, sometimes even 7 feet. And the second thing is the use of wood chips, or the thing you mentioned, is very common here. We're talking about 5, 6, 7, 8, not just a small amount, but it's just it's very common in rolling hills, and that education or that guidance could help us a lot. So would appreciate if you take this zone 0 and include those raised houses, not necessarily the house like this one that has kind of small crawlers. Thanks.
So for the people in, can the people on Zoom hear that? Yeah, okay, cool, that's good.
Actually, let me just restate it. So, Mr. Gadoji, mentioned the houses that are raised up down in the landslide area. And because of the large space underneath the house, that they are, at risk, and also the widespread use of, wood chips and mulch in the community.
But I would clarify that, the mulch in the chips are fine for, you know, we're just talking about zone zero.
Right.
But they're fine outside of zone zero.
Correct.
You know, so we don't have to eliminate all wood chips,
Right.
it's just in the zone zero.
Comment on that. In my particular case, the easement has so much wood chip that actually a four-wheel truck was actually being in stock, and I had to take a whole bunch of it out and substitute that with gravel.
Well, everybody has their individual.
I understand that.
But the rule is typically you can use wood chips to actually prevent, you know, growth coming out. And that's acceptable by the forestry division.
So, absolutely, but, whether you wanna say 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, whether you wanna say, plastic insulation,
We
and
get it,
whatever.
we get it,
Anyway.
boss, we get it.
So we got educational approach, now some interesting things here that we don't think of in our landscaping in zone zero. And that includes your garbage cans next to your house. So, or even vehicles that might, have a electrical issue or problem. Some of your HVAC and heat pumps might be an issue. Your outdoor kitchens within the first 5, that is gonna be a hard one. And then attached patio covers, that might be flammable material. So that we have to think outside our normal landscaping situation when we're talking about the zone zero.
No, you said, I want clarification, you said HVAC, you're talking about the compressor,
That's what they say, and you know, I'm not.
because everyone has theirs next
I
to their
know.
house. No,
So I don't know how they're gonna solve that.
Same when you plug in an electric vehicle.
Yes.
It's usually like in a garage or next to a house.
Well, if it was in a garage, then it would be inside inside your house itself.
protected.
Yeah.
So what is educational approach?
Meaning that they're gonna ask you nicely, and they can't cover it by code yet. They will be recommending this, but you can't, I don't think they have authority to make you tear out your outdoor kitchen or make you do without your HVAC.
How about the zero, the zone zero? Is that really enforceable right
Mhm.
now?
It's coming your way, and this is the work group recommendation from the Board of Forestry. The governor said you shall come out with a regulation in the next few months. So that's why I say it is coming, and this is the latest rules. I doubt very much they'll change too much from here.
Well, wasn't there, in some of our early block captain meetings, we talked about how they were, I think in one of our meetings, they actually got notice that they pushed back on the.
But after the fire,
Must be for the Palisades fire.
executive order.
Yeah,
Right.
After the fire.
now I understand too that, and I've heard this too, that they've actually made the zone zero, you know, priority, but they're going to kind of phase it in over the next 2-3 years. So I think this first one is going to be more, educational or whatever we say. I don't know if they're going to actually, you know, put a fine for that this year, but it is but it is definitely gonna be eventually.
And the new construction, it is in place right now.
Yeah,
And I believe might be next year that the existing construction gets in. And because you are all in very high fire hazard severity zone, likely that you'll be among the first you'll be in that first tranche of adoption. All right, so, back in 2010, we, put together a bunch of, guides for, different ways of doing things. So we actually have a little guide of what are the best practices about when to do the work, how to get rid of the material. We should, ask you not to create bare dirt, to cover up your haul routes because when you pull a lot of material out, you're sweeping the forest and causing bare dirt. So we have a whole bunch of guidance about that. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time about your privacy screening and your hedges. Those hedges are probably more volume on rolling hills, you have more hedges than any other place I've ever seen. And they're big, and the picture on the top right is an example of a hedge that it actually has a lot of fuel in it. And it is, we talk about ladder fuels that's completely connected from the bottom all the way up to the top. And so when we talk about 2 to 3 times the height of the shrub, that is a very tall flame length that's gonna be created by that hedge. So I would hope that you think about that your hedge is no taller than you need it to be for privacy, which may be 6 feet. And no wider than 2.5 feet, because I've also seen hedges that are 5 feet wide, when you really only need it to be 2.5 feet wide in order for it to provide the function that it's for. If it's for privacy, 2.5 feet is fine. So, and then the placement of the hedges, we really have to think about that. The hedge on the bottom right is right underneath the house, the eaves. So that would endanger, if that were to come through, it would not only violate the 5-foot zone, but also very likely endanger the house.
How far should I be from the house?
Well, more than 5 feet. And, certainly, it's also, it should be shorter and it should be skinnier. So I like the wispy, hedges that you can't see through, but really, we think about the fuel volume as being a thing that will really, add fuel to the fire. And then the connectivity is completely connected. And then, yeah, and also the hedges, many times when you pull the outside, it looks great on the outside, and it is dead on the inside. So those are three bad things about hedges.
What about underneath?
If you were to trim up that hedge on the right-hand side and make them into trees, then you change the structure of the vegetation. Good question. And,
What is it? What do you
if
put underneath the hedge?
you trim up that hedge on the right-hand side so that it looks more like the picture on the left, which would be hard to do, but in that particular case, but there are many places where you could make it into a tree. And I've seen a lot of the, Brazilian pepper trees that have bajillion stems underneath it. And if you got away from all the smaller stems and left one big trunk, you have a tree. And, then you also have you've broken up the connectivity, you've ruined that ladder or the ladder fuels, and you've made it a lot more simple. Okay,
Can I ask you a question?
you bet.
Maybe not unique to our area, but our canyons are filled with lemonberry plants, towards the ocean. I live off Ringgood off the Southfield. I mean, that's all you see, and those are, created hedges right close to our driveway and not too close to, well, in the backyard. If that's on the safety list, is that still, do we have to still worry about reducing that? Because that's ubiquitous. And I have neighbors that have lived in the beach area, in the Portuguese Island beach area, that come to my house specifically for getting saplings of this plant, because they heard that it was preventing fire.
So lemonade berry, has.
And I'm sorry that maybe not anyone else is interested in that topic. but-
Okay, well, the characteristics of lemonade berry is that it has usually has a high moisture content.
Right,
And it has, you can prune it to look nice. So any kind of management of lemonade berry, I would say, make it into a tree, much like the demonstration area that was on Portuguese Bend Road, where we made those shrubs into a tree. Now, it still needs to be maintained all the time.
still needs to be, because we just let it grow.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah,
Thank
the bottom part. It can grow tall,
Okay.
just not the bottom part.
Well, lemonade berry, my understanding that although it takes a little bit for it to get started,
Uh-huh.
because of the high oil content, and once it gets started, it burns like vigorously.
There's a lot of examples of that plants that you have to balance the moisture content along with the other characteristics such as the oil, like rosemary or lavender. But if, of all of the plants in the canyon, lemonade's not a bad choice, yeah, I mean, because it's there.
Well,
I've heard the same thing you said, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So, there are some great, because we're now looking at how structures are part of our defensible space and landscaping overall, there are a lot of good, ideas for easy retrofits. You know, we've already pretty much tackled roofs over the years. Almost all of our roofs are pretty good shape. But now, and windows, which is the other big weakness, is kind of tackled by, energy efficiency. So, those are two big things. And if you don't have a good roof, replace your roof. And if you haven't gotten dual pane windows, that's a big help. But those are big ticket items. Some of the other ones are low cost items that are to replace your vents, both down at the bottom as well as, at the top of your roof and then your soffit vents with very fine screens to try and keep the embers from coming in.
Speaking about, excuse me, 1/8 inch or less.
Okay, yes, 1/8 inch or less. If you can put a pencil lead through it, it's too big.
So when we attended the meeting Saturday for all the cities, I asked specifically that question, and you said that 1/16 was better.
Always better. And, now you have to consider though, that vents are for airflow.
Right.
And we haven't done a whole lot of studies for, are you gonna rot first or are you gonna burn first? So so that's the trade-off, the eight inches where they landed as far as code goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The
But
fire
there's-
captain said.
There's also the baffled fence,
Yes,
that's like a zigzag for the air to get in.
I love this idea. They have a vent that has ridges on it. And, it means that the ember will have to go over the ridge and then down and then over another ridge before it can get into your attic. And that allows better airflow as well.
And it's called the baffle.
Baffled fence.
It's barricade or Vulcan.
Well, okay, now I know of I can share that, because I called them today. That actually melts and seals it off, and that's designed for adjacent fire, not ember fire. In other words, if you have a fire right next to your house, purpose of that is to seal it off. Because it has some alloy in it that melts and seals it off if it's hot.
So that one is Vulcan.
And they're very expensive.
And that is what uses intumescent paint, and he's exactly right, that when it gets hot, it puffs up and creates a char. But the other one is a metal, baffled vent, and
Yeah,
it's a
that's-
different one than the closing of the vents part. So the baffled vent is kind of like a no-fail thing. So Google that one. So, if you go to CAL FIRE, actually Google CAL FIRE's low-cost retrofit list, and it has this long list of things that you can do. And including, caulking all of the gaps, where the embers might happen. When you guys had a whole smoky set of days, where the smoke came in is where you ought to be caulking. Because that's where you might have some gaps for embers. But also, when you consider that you might be subjected to smoke in the future, the caulking would help with that too. And more communities are talking about smoke management, having a clean spot, have where people go to recharge for their lungs. So smoke is now being a consideration too. And then the last one is, consider fences and outbuildings in your retrofitting. So here is a great study by the National Institute for Safety and Technology about outbuildings and how the outbuildings were a major factor in homes burning up in a campfire. I'm gonna go up to the screen again. So here's an example. This house has done their defensible space. And they put a building way far away from their house, no problem, not gonna burn up that house. They put it next to the fence, and it would burn up this house. So that was like, oh, and aha. Whereas this example they've got a residence that is far enough away from their auxiliary building and also far enough away from that, so that equidistance is kind of okay. So think about not only your fences as being a connected. They talk about that, we talk about connection and fuels, but this is a connection with structures. Because the heat that comes from this house will burn that up, and that means it's connected. So you might hear more about this structure separation distance. The thing they recommend is a structure separation distance of 50 feet. But that's 50 feet, not including the deck. The deck, you don't get credit, you know, if the deck were here, it'd be not 50 feet, it'd be 30 less. So that is, they want 50 feet of good defensible space in between two. Now, if one retrofitting strategy is if it's almost 50 feet, here's 25 feet, you would retrofit and make radiant heat, retrofit it from radiant heat on just this side and this side. You wouldn't have to do this side, you wouldn't have to do that side. Because these are the parts that are gonna have fire and radiation between.
What's an idea of radiant barrier? What would be a radiant barrier?
Stucco is pretty good, and the thicker the stucco would be better. Brick is a good radiant, you know, you might wanna put a brick facade on this. There are those are the two things that I'm thinking of, stucco and brick. Or
I'm imagining
facade.
aluminum. Shine it back.
Yeah, okay, so, that is just coming, it's kind of new in the fire world, we're thinking about these outbuildings and how you might wanna retrofit that old shed, or do you need that old shed? Knowing that if it were to burn out, it might endanger your house and then probably your neighbor's house.
Also, be sure to check with the architectural committee before you make an offer.
That is one, question, Christian, for the community association, you know, so I know we have this favored wood siding, but do the current architectural rules, want fire resistant wood siding, or are they insisting on wood siding, or, you know?
The party board, and there's a lot of,
Fire
manufactured things that are fire resistant, meet the fire code and, appear to look like wood.
Good, so thank you for that clarification, but also I think that, anything that individuals could do to protect their home actually protects their community. So things like brick or stucco really should be considered. I don't know why we bought our house and it's stucco, you know, so it's grandfathered in from the time it was built. But, you know, we've always gotten really good credit from our inspections and our insurance agent because we have a stucco home. So, you know.
And you know, you asked a question about an alternative, you're right, the hardy plank would be a great alternative to put on the middle scenario. Yeah, and it's a
Could you repeat that?
cementitious. Oh, well, hardy plank or any cementitious, material would be a good retrofit for radiant heat protection. Alright, so as I mentioned, there are a giant programs to educate, and there are, as I mentioned, also more and more programs that will help you do this. Not only guides, but there are, you know, more and more people are talking about funding for cost sharing for retrofitting, knowing it is a community benefit. Alright, so the Rolling Hills Association has these variety guides, and they're on, I believe they're on your website.
They are on the city's website.
Yes, okay. And, it talks about, fuel management standards, some tips on hiring contractors. There's a little bit about, canyon management, how to do it, and, the priorities for it. And some of the cautions for be sure that you don't hurt any water. Best practices, make sure you don't have too much bare dirt, those kinds of best practices. And then some guidance on is it okay to use, when is it okay to use hand labor or machinery or goats or different kinds of field treatment methods? It's all there. And an example of that is policies to discourage or remove your invasive and flammable, plants and trees. So, eucalyptus with stringy bark especially is, not all of the eucalypts are the same, but the ones with the stringy bark are particularly problematic. And then, of course, junipers are just as bad as the eucalyptus, and I know you're taking action on palm trees.
How do cypress trees fall into that?
Italian cypresses are actually outlawed in Marin, and they are also prohibited in Berkeley and, Napa, I think also, so there's broad accepted belief that the Italian cypresses are pretty bad. And it's the same, for the same reason that they, you know, if you pull apart the Italian cypress, it's dead underneath it.
It's dead underneath, yeah.
Yeah, and they're really, really tall, so when they go, then they too will cast embers a very long distance.
Right. Okay, that means I need to take some cypress trees down.
Oak trees are great.
What?
He was saying oaks.
Oak,
Oak, yes, yes, plant oaks,
oak, elm,
yeah.
Pepper trees.
We don't have.
How about red, how about red?
Yeah.
Redwoods are fine.
Yeah, we have.
There was a question about how, about redwoods, and redwoods are, pretty non-flammable, except that their leaflets need to be cleaned up.
Yeah.
The tree itself is good, but the debris it drops is very fluffy, and it carries the fire very well. Okay, so, we talked about what the individuals can do, and now here we are gonna, highlight a nice demonstration project done by the Rolling Hills Association, along Portuguese Bend Road. It's hard to believe that there are 3 trucks of biomass removed from that. So that it looks like it's really overgrown, but it's absent those 3 trucks of biomass, and it will burn so much more gently than if it were not. It also has no dead material in it, so everything that is grown is lush and green, and thus will be much less apt to ignite and burn with ferocity. So it looks great, and you still need to maintain it, still need to cut those little branches off at the bottom.
Also, if I can just add, we did this, or the board approved this, it's over 4 acres. And it was done as a demonstration of what could be done on a canyon slope in terms of, reducing the fire fuel and, just having a manageable plan. So stop by and look over the edge of the slope.
Yes. Yes.
The rolling hills on our south border. We are against an open area. Conservancy. And there is a thick row of trees, tall, enormous trees, eucalyptus, pine and palm. That bottom line is just a beautiful elevation mechanism for all of those brush fires from that open area and elevate it and transfer to the heat. And that would need to be considered, if we consider this kind of attention to the slope area, which is not exposed to high fire danger, then that area is exposed to high fire danger. Not only that, but also is public open, which means potential of accident is much higher. So I would appreciate if some attention is paid to that.
You know, it's great that everybody is thinking about fire hazards and appreciate the thought behind how fire spread might go. For risk assessment, we really do want to overlay where is that hazard in relation to the things we care about. And we should always think about the special areas, meaning your roadsides and evacuation routes first, your own structure next, and then I might say the hinterlands after that. So yes, they may be a hazard, but are they are they next to the place that you could really, wanna pay attention to? And in your own structure and in your canyons, that you wanna work from the house out. So even in canyons, you start from the structure and you go down the canyon or up the canyon either way. But for the Rolling Hills Association, really to pay attention to the roadsides and, follow these treatments of mow the grass, keep the trees up high, and make sure that you have not that connectivity. And then in the easements, you know, your easements could offer some protection as well. And, thank goodness you have those, and a very wide easement along the roads. You're so lucky to be able to have that. And then in the canyons, we do have a canyon management guide, and as I mentioned, start from the house and the roads and work out, because those are your values. And, look at the demonstration project, and also know that those canyons are designated as a sensitive ecological area, I think by the county. So if you were to do something, of course, take out the mustard and then bases on it, and then leave the natives and thin those so that, and try to keep no bare spots and make sure your soil is kept in place. We've got some slopes that are gonna go away, and we're worried about that. And if the canyon landowners can work together, then you get more work done.
You said avoid bare spots, what do you mean by that?
Well,
Adding to it, so it's.
if you were to cut it down to the ground,
Yes,
and then and not put anything back on it,
yes,
then the raindrops will come down, and it actually has an impact, and it moves the soil further down the hill.
so there'd be an erosion problem,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So when you cut
But there are areas here that, don't have vegetation, but they can absorb the water.
It is always better to have a little bit of softening of the raindrop impact. And whether or not that's mulch or grass or heaven forbid, just a thin layer of cut up pieces like masticated areas. Jute is another reason why they're putting that there, is to keep the soil from having the raindrops, push it down.
But if you have things like grass, they have to be maintained, right?
Yeah, grass would be fine.
Fine.
What about the black mustard? I know that's a problem because of it being tool and it's
Yeah.
an invasive plant.
Yep.
Is it simple? Can you simply just cut it down so that it lays down on the ground and not remove it? Because that's what's basically happening with the goats, is they eat it, but if you look where they've been, looks like it's been on the ground.
So if you were to, first of all, with goats, they actually are consuming the little bits and pieces, and you're seeing the stalks.
Right,
So they actually have removed a lot of the biomass, and especially the smaller stuff that might be more apt to ignite.
oh, I see.
And the sticks on the ground are not there's not as much volume, so that if it were to ignite, it's not gonna be that big a deal, and also it's not the fine fines like grass. But the, goats, you have to manage them with caution, because they can, like any tool, you can be mismanaged. And they can be overgrazed, or they could do not enough work.
Okay.
Okay, so here's an example, I mean, I would refer you to the canyon management guide, and it actually talks about, what the problems are for canyons. And the picture on the right is a chimney, and it just shows how it's concentrating the heat as it goes up, so that there is a concern. And, but in order to consider that, you have to think about, what does that canyon do for you? It gives you the recreation, it gives you aesthetics, and also identify the things that will keep you from doing good work there. It's this topography, this lack of access, it's just so much to do. But I wouldn't say that don't be frozen and say, I can't do anything. You can just start from your house out, and start from the roads out, and do that bit, and start there, and you'll learn. Right, I think that's pretty much it. You have some choices. The shaded fuel break is on the top part, is like the shaded fuel break of the demonstration project. You can have those clumpy bushes that, I mentioned in our, best guides. And that's another strategy for canyons, is that you can have, some of the bushes and then gaps and more bushes and gaps. All right, so this is the last slide, and I just, want to thank you for being here and also encouraging you to use the plans you've already developed. You have a community wildfire protection plan, and a lot of people put really a lot of effort in that, and so that's a good resource for you. The Los Angeles Fire Department has a million other, good, websites and links, as does CAL FIRE, and, keep doing the good work you're doing. And I'm happy to answer more questions too.
You said that we've been doing a good job.
You have.
How would you rate us though? I mean, that's a nice statement, but how would you rate us today in terms of fuel management?
So your fuel management along the roads are good. You need to work on your hedges and you need to, and think about the connectivity along the roads. And then your own houses, you have, probably more vegetation around your houses than many communities have. It's, so it's not, you have a lot of volume of them. But a lot of them are very well trimmed and, yeah.
So how would you rate them?
Yeah, I know.
You have to be honest about that.
Probably B.
A B,
A B.
I would disagree with it.
Well,
How about the canyons? How would you rate our management of canyons?
so I put that in there, think about the most important thing is your roads, and then your structures, and the canyons are least important to me. So I figured that into the management of it. And I work in areas with a lot of open space that has areas that are not managed. And as long as you have protection around your high values at risk, you're gonna be okay.
So
I would just,
yeah, you would say that we have done a B job
For your community, yes.
for the community.
so I would
Go
just
ahead,
say,
I have another quote.
I would just say I think we've done a good job on the evacuation routes, but, you know, those are like the three main roads. And we have all these little feeder streets that have a lot of vegetation on it, and we're very small, we don't have big easements on these feeder streets.
Yeah.
So, you know, I would ask you to take a little drive if you're
Yeah.
here and,
Most
and,
people
and
live
help
on-
us understand the feeder streets that actually.
Most people live on feeder streets.
Yeah.
So I would suggest that when the community is, the community, Rolling Hills Community Association is working within that easement. In those feeder streets, it's really mostly the residents that have to bear the burden.
I understand, but that's where most of the people live and would
Yeah.
you, I don't know if they're B, would be considered Bs.
Okay.
Roadside is.
Yeah.
The small streets have roadside easements.
Yeah, so so then it's a matter of the residents to each of them do their part along the road.
No, all the easements are from the community association.
All.
Yeah, all our roadside.
The priority has just been the evacuation routes, which are not the
The
feeder.
roadside easements are community association.
So clearly you're hearing that there's another spot to do work. I had a question in the back.
Well, more of a comment than a question. You made the statement that the canyons aren't, if you're looking at the value of what's at risk.
Mhm.
We have many of our deepest, most over vegetated canyons are parallel, they're 15 feet from the evacuation routes. So if there's a fire in those, if there's flames in those canyons,
Mhm.
that blocks, that's now affecting one of the things that you're talking about that we want to protect, which is your road and your structures. So I think to Jean's point about how we're doing in the canyons, you have to understand, we all have to understand that those canyons are, if they're right next to an evacuation route, there is a danger on.
Yeah.
Well, work from the road out. That's all, you know, you can have varying widths along the roads.
Yeah.
And, okay,
Yeah, we know how to do it, it's.
Well, it's enforcement. I had somebody told me they can't termite their house because they have vines against the house. And I have vines growing on their house.
And they won't
And
cut
I'm,
them?
and I'm going like, hello, you need to take that stuff out. Yeah, and then eucalyptus, we've been trimming the eucalyptus because of the phone lines, you know, and especially for underground. But like, why aren't we removing some of them? Some of them are so tall and still so close to the road. And it just really scares me.
That is happening.
Yeah, we still have a lot of,
A lot of work to do.
yeah, a lot of work to do, because there's a lot of lines from the electrical company that are still going through trees and
Yeah.
branches and all that type of thing. That's a lot of a big problem here.
I got a couple online questions too.
okay,
So, one is, Rolling Hills, uses mulch. What is the recommended depth of mulch?
so I like to have 4 inches of mulch. If it's more than that, then it can smolder and when a fire comes and produce an awful lot of heat that's penetrated down into the soil, it'll smolder a really long time, and maybe that'll be an issue for containment. We had some fires rekindle because of after smoldering, and so we don't wanna have that happen again.
So less than 4 inches.
Yeah, or more.
Another question, hold on, let's do online questions first.
So, fences that touch the home, if we shouldn't have wooden fences, connecting with our if we shouldn't have wooden fences intersecting with our homes with metal fences, which would you suggest be allowed? And I think I can, answer part of that question. I think that, if somebody wanted to propose that, that's something that certainly that the architectural committee would approve. Metal fences can be powder coated, so they are white and match the other fences. I would just say to that, submit to the architectural committee what you have in mind. And then I think that is it right now for the chat. Or for the question, online
Our
questions.
community is so full of 3-rail wood fences. So you think the 3-rail wood fences are okay as long as they're not next to your house?
Well, compared with the normal 6-foot-high, 1-inch thick fence that is solid all amongst things, the 3-rail fences are better. And that's because not only is there less fuel to it, but each one of those boards are bigger. And the bigger boards are less ignition prone than the smaller boards.
Yeah, can I ask you questions about your report here? On discussion and conclusions on page 27
Oh, boy.
specifically. And also some lead up comments that I noticed in reviewing the report. The data that was used, first of all, was from a station that was pretty far down the coast.
Yeah,
And there's one that's closer, Laguna
yeah, I did
Station.
know.
Why wasn't the Laguna Station used?
Well, Alisol, and Laguna are pretty close.
Right.
So, if I were to use Laguna, it'd be pretty much the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other thing I noticed in the data, on one of the pages indicated the assumptions were for moderate assumptions. As on one of the pages where you had the screenshot
Okay,
and it says moderate assumptions. What if you put in assumptions that were equivalent to what happened on January 7th?
so, if I were to put all that in, it wouldn't help you in decision making. So I used data that was consistent with the CAL fire hazard severity zone rating. And so we could compare, with their output too. And they also did not do the worst of the worst.
Yeah, I
So
realize that, and that's a mistake, I feel that they should have been doing that,
it
but.
would,
But in any event, you know, I'll differ with you on that, okay? That I feel that you should. If the association is willing to pay for this, go back and put in what happened on January 7th. And let's see what effect that would have had on Rolling Hills if we had actually added the mission.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are two comments, and then going to the conclusion.
Isn't there a very low probability of that happening here?
No,
Very
because it
low.
was on the north side of Crest. And my understanding was blowing like hell on the north side of Crest. I live on the south side of Crest, and I didn't notice any winds. But on the north side of Crest, from what I've been told, I'm with one person. And in fact, I was told LA County Sheriff's, or the fire department, was knocking on the city hall door, asking them to shut us down, don't allow people in and out. That's what I've been told. Maybe true, maybe not. But what I've been told is the winds on the north side of Crest were horrendous. Okay, south side of Crest was nothing. Okay, so if you really want to see what a worst case scenario would be, factor in those numbers and run the model. Now let's go to the actual conclusions.
But wait
I am
a second, man. Clarification, what, the palisades and everything, it wasn't just the strength of the winds, but it was the length and the endurance, how long it lasted. And I'm thinking, yeah, the winds were, I think were very strong here. But they didn't last, I don't think, as long, several days and everything like they did up north.
I don't know.
and this kind of analysis, it doesn't, you have to really put down the fuel moisture, which we certainly can do. And so it's within the possibilities to be able to model it and show that it's all gonna be read in all places. But if you're gonna use it for decision making and risk assessing, then you wanna see where there are comparisons.
All right, so the bottom line, the report says the canyons are the problem. That's what basically the report says. Bottom line. But on page 27, I'm really confused. I didn't even know there was Sepulveda Canyon in Rolling Hills.
That's right in our backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like.
Size.
Sides
Side
canyon.
canyon is ours.
Yeah.
So Sepulveda is sides canyon.
Yeah.
All right. Because you go to Google map, you can't find Sepulveda Canyon. Okay, so that's sides canyon.
Yeah.
All right, so number one, the ridge between Sunny Ridge and Middle Ridge Lane. That appears to me to be Storm Hill Park. Correct or not correct?
Correct.
Okay. Storm Hill Park is owned by the city of Rolling Hills and is leased to the homeowners association. So this is number one on your hit list. So this is an area where we don't have to deal with private property owners. We don't have to get anybody's permission to do anything. So it's the city and the homeowners association that focus on Storm Hill Park to take care of that situation.
Because it's overgrown.
Because it's the high, if you read the report, it's the highest predicted fire behavior. Number one, ridge between Sunny Ridge Road and Middle Ridge Lane.
So, again, I go back to where is it in relation to your life safety issues and your structures? So that would factor in.
Storm Hill Park can also cut us off on an evacuation route if it heads the wrong way.
I have a comment in the back.
And Alfred, I appreciate your comment, and that's not really a Carol Rice issue, and the city and the association are looking at that. It's been brought up and we are taking a look at it.
Okay, so Sepulveda Canyon is sides, now I know where that is. Okay, George F. Canyon, east of Saddleback. That's the big canyon that actually goes into RPV, Rolling Hills Estates. Way on the other east side of the city here. Anything that we do there would have to be in coordination with the folks outside, and that's a huge canyon. From what I can tell.
It parallels Georgia.
Right.
So, a lot of it is in.
Yeah, but it's really, a lot of it's not in Rolling Hills. So George F. Canyon, if you look at that, it's a natural nature trail, and we're talking about that.
Yeah.
The canyon between Portuguese Bend Road and Chuck Dragon Road. I cannot figure out where that is. What's the canyon between Portuguese Bend Road, Bend Road and Chuck Dragon Road?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have another question over here.
So, when they were talking about different types of trees, a tree popped up, but you didn't, I don't know if you heard it, didn't comment. They said, they mentioned pepper trees. Did you wanna comment on pepper trees?
So, in the, what makes a friend or foe, a pepper tree, I'm going through there, it has a high fuel volume, so that's not a good thing. Its form restricts airflow, it is kind of wispy, but it's, I wouldn't give it bad mark for that one. It has really tiny little particles, which makes it easy to ignite. And then it has a lot of dead material in it. It drops so much dead material at the bottom of it. It would very easily ignite and then catch into the tree canopy. So probably the biggest thing that I don't like about pepper trees is its roots down at the bottom, so that it creates a ladder feel and can get into the tree canopy. It doesn't have a whole lot of high moisture in its leaves, so it's not a great thing, nor does it have mineral content. So it's just mostly a matter of, it's a big messy tree with a lot of dead stuff in it. And roots.
So do you leave the stump when you take it out? You're talking about roots?
You know, I leave the stump in.
Yeah.
To keep the roots in there.
With the tree itself?
Yeah, or if you needed to keep the tree, you know, you'd have to limb up the thing, the branches, and then make sure that all the little leaflets and the dead material is taken off every single year.
You don't want a pepper tree close to your house, with the roots,
Yeah.
or your driveway.
But there's plenty on the evacuation routes, and I think that they need to be maintained.
Yes,
I just, as one of the block captain leads, I just want to inform people that we're going to have a special showing of our canyon management videos
Okay.
on May 21st.
that's.
So
fine.
it will appear in Dwelling Live and in the Blue Newsletter. And if people come at 4 o'clock, we'll have a popcorn party and talk about canyon management. I think this has been very helpful, Carol. We're so thankful for the work you did to put the report together. And I think that these things are terrific knowledge for us all to hear.
And to the association.
And you're
Yes,
used to it.
thank you.
And that's-
Yeah, as a resident, for the last 7 months, I have seen more work done than the previous 7 years I've been
Yeah.
here, including reaching out to professionals like yours. And I want to thank him. I have a peace of mind that if we keep this kind of attention, we are good. At least I feel I'm safe, I'm good, and my family is good, my family is safe. And I want to thank the association to really step up and give a lot of peace of mind, at least to me. And actually doing a lot. Thank you.
Question about the canyons, you talked about canyons that are close to evacuation routes. There are a lot of major canyons that are not right adjacent to evacuation routes, and they're classified as very high risk areas. What is the risk? Is there an ember risk or just general fuel and the winds coming up,
Yeah.
low starting and pushing high? Or what, how much risk is there in those?
I'm looking forward to hearing the video. But the problem with the canyons is it will preheat the fuel at the top of the canyon and make that more easily ignited and last longer flame lengths. I think I heard that.
Okay, so it starts at the bottom and just accelerates going up.
It does, and you know, because it's at the top, it's preheated by all the heat that's coming up this way, so, it just kind of snowballs, and gets hotter and hotter and faster. and
Okay,
faster.
and one more question. You made a couple of comments about the barrier that kind of Crest Road at the top of the hill
Mhm.
creates, and there've been a couple of fires since I've been here over the years, a long time ago, but I'm not aware that there's been a fire that started on the south side that literally jumped over Crest Road. Is that because of the terrain there or luck or what?
The.
Fire department.
Yeah, fire.
Yeah.
Definitely, usually when a fire comes from the ocean, it is more moisture laden. So a fire that comes from the bottom of the canyons are not likely to have the same dryness associated with it if it were coming from the northeast. The winds are like relative humidity 50% as opposed to 5.
Okay.
And then the other thing is, no, I'll just leave it at that.
Have we ever had a fire, from the northeast? North of, I haven't been here. I've been here.
Not in recent history, but there have been fires that started down here towards the gate and burnt up, like Middle Ridge area.
Okay.
There's another question, about, roofs. People are reluctant to, clear their roofs, if they have the concrete tiles because they break so easily. So for fire safety, is there another roofing material that would be fire safe but easily cleaned?
There are lots of roof options, actually asphalt shingle, although the architectural
We won't.
community.
Yeah.
No.
So, the short answer is there are some other materials that are allowed. So I can post those with, links to the other, documents, reference documents that you referenced tonight.
I do wanna, I forgot to mention another thing that is highly popular in places that have lots of trees, and that's a leaf gutter garden. So that on your gutter, you have things that keep all the leaves from poking through. And that's been pushed by a lot of forested communities.
It is a good thing.
It is a good thing.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. Okay, well,
I just wanted to say, as a block captain as well, we've heard about you. I knew there was a report. I personally didn't take time to read it, you know, some people read it in fine detail and stuff, but to have you come here and physically show us was really, really great, so I appreciate your time. I think we know that there's a lot of work to do, there's a lot of people who are really complacent about stuff. You know, you could do, like, I could take my trees out, but my neighbor doesn't. So there's things like that, but I think it's really also really great that you highlight that life is the most important thing before structures and everything else, because and people hear this forever, but I went through the Malibu fires and people were pissed off that fire trucks were sitting there and not saving homes. And that's because they were positioned to save lives, not save the homes. And the fire temperature was so hot that they couldn't even get near the homes. They just want to make sure they saved the people. And fire tornadoes went through there and stuff, and they didn't do enough education. So this is my suggestion. They didn't do enough education to let people know that was the purpose of fire trucks sitting there, looking like they weren't, like firemen weren't doing anything. And so that's why you hear in a lot of communities, people stay behind to try to save their homes. But how many people did we lose because they stayed behind in some of these fires? I mean, yes, you hear the hero stories, but then we hear the stories about people who stayed behind and they stayed too long. And we know we have an evacuation problem here with feeder rows and stuff like that. So the point is, you just gotta get out. Just get out and pack like you may never go home, because people take a toothbrush and a change of clothes and then they lose everything.
Yeah.
So anyway, but thank you. So I hope that you continue to be funded to educate people about some of those things.
Oh, also,
Thank you.
on the drills. So we were talking about, wouldn't it be fun to have an evacuation drill? Not a
Yes.
drill, an exercise, an
Yeah.
exercise. And we maybe start on a feeder road. And, I was speaking with another community in rural Napa, and they were saying, yeah, we'll do that, and we're gonna have a contest. Who has the best go bag? You know, who brought goodies for their neighbors? Because, you know, they're, who goodies for their neighbors, thinking about the community. if you have a go bag, it's not just about me, yes, it's me first. But about the community too, bring extra water, a little extra water.
Fresh bread, fresh bread.
Yeah.
Fresh bread, fresh baked bread.
Anybody that wants bread is gonna have to. Fix chicken, and stay in there.
Recently talked to Samantha, because there was a resident that brought up about some of the emergency pods that are in some of the neighborhoods. That where the CERT supplies a pod of things, and so I did talk to Samantha about that, about seeing if it's something that, you know, somehow we can get connected to.
Anybody would like to host one at their house?
Yeah, I know.
That backs up to a road that is very accessible.
Well, we were told that we can't put a container, but maybe Patrick can give us a container, but also, you know, they can be expensive and you have to rotate the stuff that's in them, but there are communities in PB that already have those CERT containers, did you know that?
We are aware of that, the space issue is, we just don't have anywhere to put it. We don't have room for parking, you know, so to take up valuable space, you know, we're fighting to find room for a generator, so, space is our biggest issue. Otherwise, it's been discussed for probably 20 years.
I just
So-
wanna ask a question, do you have any data how useful the Firewise communities are? Firewise,
Designation?
yeah, the designation of.
Is it in terms of getting?
I mean, is it really worth, I mean, have those communities, which I understand is quite a few of them in California. Have they been, is there less fires in those areas or, I don't know, it's
There's
hard
no
to
data
say.
yet,
Bill?
but I personally have started about 10 Firewise communities.
Uh-huh.
And they are, they're organized, and now Firewise requires that you have a 3-year plan on one, education and outreach, defensible space and field management, evacuation planning, and structure retrofitting. So we know what we're gonna do this year 1, year 2, year 3. And, even though nobody from Firewise says, did you do what you wanted to do in year 1? There's not that yet, I think there will be. But they're working on it, they're organizing, they're doing,
There's also fire safety councils too.
worked on those too, and oftentimes it's good if they coincide the boundaries, but,
How
Yeah, they
are you
complement each
funded?
other.
Like, will they continue to fund, I mean, with so many cutbacks in the government, right, will they continue to fund things that you do?
well, depends on, the organization, Sonoma is, I think, funded by the federal government, their Firewise program is, and that's not going well. Napa is funded by the county, and that's going great groundbusters. Many other places are funded by the state, so it depends, it's a patchwork of funding,
Yeah.
so, don't know. Yes,
Carol, when we were talking earlier, you were saying that what we have here in Public Hills is Pacific Palisades and Eden Fire. You know, I read at least that in the Eden Palisades fires, the winds got up to 100 miles an hour, 80 to 100. Because they were being funneled, you know, through the breaks in the mountains where the wind was coming through. We also talked in general about the space between the houses so that we don't have the combustion problems that they had in either of those communities. And separately, you mentioned to me that there seems to be microclimates on our north side. Rolling Hills has been here long enough that there should have been a fire, but there hasn't been a fire. Can you put that together in a way that might make sense to the folks here?
so in Eden and also in Palisades, they were on west facing slopes under what's called a subsiding wind, where there's pressure aloft and it pushes it down. And the more down it goes, the higher pressure it is, so the faster it goes and the hotter it is. So if you're down by the ocean, you're at the hottest and the highest pressure. So that is,
Being next to the ocean?
it actually was worse. In Santa Barbara, the same phenomenon happens, and it's called sundowners, and the ones on the coast, the right part of here, it's hotter, you know, but
It's
you're.
just crazy to imagine that you could be next to the ocean and have a problem.
Yes, well, there you are in the town, yeah, so, but here you have the opposite, you have a north facing slope and the wind has to go up, and so it doesn't have the same sort of pressures as in Palisades and Eden. So there are some microclimate differences. Same thing happens in the peninsula of the East Bay. You know, the cities of Palo Alto and Cupertino and the mountains above them really don't get the same kind of winds as in Oakland and Berkeley that have caught fire. Did that answer your question?
Does it make a difference that we have ocean kind of on both sides of this peninsula? That helps.
Well, she just said that it burns by the ocean, but maybe because of the winds. I would think because we have moisture.
I can understand that we're higher up, so the air's going up, so maybe there's a ventry in between that kind of keeps the pressure off.
Is the, that elevation effective in any way?
Not that, it's the subsiding winds, and the subsiding winds start in the Great Basin. So it's a really large scale phenomenon that comes down and, really accelerates on the west facing slopes.
I've got a couple,
Santa Ana.
I've got a
As a-
couple more
as a-
online questions.
Yes.
One is, will the city be, or association be taking care of the weeds on the side of the roads on Saddleback and smaller roads?
Yes.
The answer is yes, and that work will start the last week of May. If any homeowner is concerned about it before then and would like to weed whack their own frontage, we welcome the help. Second question is, what about houses and old barns with shake roofs?
Yeah, it's a good one.
So, old barns are, I mean, weathered, they have a lot of nooks and crannies, opportunities for embers to go in. It's really a vulnerability. And wood shake roofs are especially prone to ignition. That's why we outlawed them a long time ago. What more can I say? There are some paints that for old barns and old structures that can render it fire retardant. It's not as good as complete retrofitting, but it is a stopgap.
It's very expensive.
They'd have to redo the roof.
The wood shake roofs would have to go, yeah.
As a,
Very
From just a bottom line overall standpoint, if we were to have conditions like they had at the Palisades, fire starts, is there really anything we can do?
Get out.
Yeah, other than the life, saving life, I mean, that's key.
Yeah, pretty much, that is the worst. So you have
Well,
done,
that's why I'm asking.
yeah. I think you probably haven't, done enough, still work on it, along your roads to get everybody out. And then you're gonna have winners and
That's your
losers,
focus.
winners and losers in your house, in your structure, sorry, in your structures.
Yeah.
And you will have a fair amount of house loss, but not all of them.
Okay.
And you're just increasing your odds. Same thing in Napa, you know, Napa in the 17 and 20s, they had 80-mile-an-hour winds. And there were some were in the subdivisions where they did, and there were a few subdivisions, where they did work like you're doing here in Rolling Hills. They lost some houses that maybe 25% instead of all of them.
Okay, and if the city and the association are, continue to make improvements, there's a limit to the fact that those improvements can be done without homeowners clearing their own property. Thank you.
Also, I have to say that, we are working on a structure-to-structure ignition model that will, that does show the rate of spread and where the fires will go. And then we layered in, what if we made the structures ignition resistant? What if were able to retrofit these certain structures? And they said it was not nearly as important if it was pepper spray, pepper, but if there was a line. If there was one line of structures that worked together, that did form a barrier. So, that's hopeful for you to work together, because one house here and one house here and not in the middle was not nearly as effective as 3 houses together.
as a additional comment is that PG&E fire in Northern California really started all of this activity in terms of fire prevention, reducing ignition, that's what association is working with utilities to reduce that ignition, and propagation. How do we contain it even if it starts? And then I have visited every single spot for that fire at Northern California, the Camp Fire, PG&E, the whole area. We have learned a lot from that. And since the fire in LA, regulators are jumping to accelerate all of those lessons learned over the last 6 years for the quicker, faster implementation. So not only we are working like expert like yourself to reduce propagation, to containment, all of that. There is substantial work, like what association is doing with SCE, as well as the others, utilities, as well as even the manufacturers to reduce the risk of ignition. So there's all, I've never seen so many hands in coordination to do this. So I just want to add that it's not a one-dimensional, that there's a whole bunch of holistic view of this. Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
I have a question. I think you may have mentioned in passing earlier something about financial programs that might be available. Do you have any sort of, not specifics, but any sort of thoughts or visibility to what's coming or where that's going or how those might develop in the next months or years?
There's the congressman that represents Orange County is quite interested in pushing a cost share program for house retrofitting, structure retrofitting.
Okay.
And so, if I can remember that gentleman's name, it'd be great. One syllable. Yes.
I've asked in the past about, like, once we evacuate out of here, have you assessed what it's like for us to literally get off the peninsula?
I have not.
Once we get out the gates, and then the fires going that way, and those people have to evacuate.
Trouble begins.
It's really gonna be depend on every situation, because like in 2009, it was pretty contained. So, Eastfield was not being evacuated and not really affected. So, even though the sheriff was closed the whole city, in terms of people coming in, they weren't so worried about evacuating Eastfield at that time. So the whole peninsula may not be evacuating all at once. It will, because of the canyons and that kind of thing, it will be pockets. And at first, I have only experienced a couple of fires and then I only know what people tell me. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. In terms of the information and information sharing and the task force getting together, a boss, that is so true. And actually, when I initially called Carol in January to talk to her about this, she was on a task force. The fires hadn't even been totally put out yet, and she was working with a group on lessons learned from the Palisades fire. So we're very fortunate to have such an expert available to us. This conversation will continue in terms of how residents can be helped, what more we can do to help people work together. We know that pooling our resources helps things happen quickly, as we've seen on Wagon Lane. The board is going to be doing just a debrief about this meeting at Thursday morning, and stay tuned. Thank you very much.
We have.